the Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Root of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. If you are new here, welcome, welcome, welcome. Take a seat, grab a chair, and make sure that you press the like button and you review or join our Facebook group or join our Twitter group. Please, we love having new people over. And if you're here, thank you so much for returning. My guest today is Tshiamiso Makwela, born in Soweto, South Africa, and now living in Capetown, also in South Africa. She's a PhD student in Astronomy Education Research at the University of Capetown. In this episode, we learned that her mom was her biggest motivator, or rather, as she calls her, my tag team partner, who really pushed and motivated her into the science. Tshiamiso was a rather inquisitive child who loved science, even though she had no idea what science was. We also find out why she's called Doctor of the Moon. That's her nickname. I will not spoil it. You have to tune in. And then I ask her about her journey into astronomy and how she got into it. And she tells us a wonderful story of how it all began. She has continued to it from Wits University in undergrad to Capetown for her PhD. In her master's year, she combined her love for astronomy and education, and she has further pursued this up until her PhD. We learn about her exciting research in astronomy education, where she looks at ways of making astronomy content knowledgeable and accessible to teachers and students. Tshiamiso tells us the importance of this very important work, and we learn that the best part of this research is that she's interacting and working with the community, which has always been close to her heart. Lastly, in this episode, we talk about inclusivity in astronomy. So you got to tune in and listen in. Let's go. Hi, Tshiamiso. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Anne. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm really excited to have a conversation with you.
Oh my gosh, you've been trying to get this together, and finally we are here.
Yeah.
We're here. So now, for the purpose of everybody else getting to know you, please just give us a brief introduction. Where you're from, where you're currently based, and in short, what are you doing?
I am Tshiamiso Makwela. Pronounced as Tshiamiso, not tiramisu. And I am from South Africa. I'm from South Africa, and I was born in Soweto at Bara, just like most of the kids from Gauteng. And I was raised in Soweto all my life. And I'm the only child. My mother has only one child, and that's me. And currently, I left my mom in Gauteng in Joburg, and I am in Cape Town pursuing my PhD in Astronomy Education Research. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Oh, an only child. I was an only child for a bit. How is that? Like for 16 years. But how is that like all the way up into adulthood? Do you sometimes wish you had siblings, or are you good?
Well, it depends. I mean, there's some nice perks to it, you know. If mom comes home with one sweet, it's mine type of thing. There's no way it's going to someone else. But I think that it hasn't. Right now, sometimes I do have like some attachment issues. Like, you know, when I visit your work, sometimes I feel sad when I have to come back to Cape Town and leave my mom. But some days I'm just like really grateful for, you know, for my cousins and my half brothers and sisters. Although we didn't grow up together, sometimes I'm just like, oh, at least we have them, and they are there for my mom. So she's not always totally alone, as I would sometimes think. And my mom is a busy woman, so she'll be like, girl, get on with your life. I'll get on with mine. So I think sometimes I think I'm more attached to my mom than she is to me. And yeah, I think, so it doesn't get better. I think the more I grow up, the more I become a mama's baby, because I'll have a cough and I'll just call my mom like, am I sure? Should I be taking this? Is it okay? And she's there like, girl, you have everything you need to take care of yourself. So yeah, but it's been good, but I'm really grateful for cousins and siblings around. I'm grateful for them as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, even with cousins or half brothers, I think the beautiful thing about us Africans, that word really doesn't exist apart from English. Like, we are siblings anyway. Yeah. So they're brothers and sisters. Yeah. So, that whole thing of Ubuntu, like everybody is your brother or your sister. So, but it's great that you have that nice connection with your siblings. I really like that. But anyway, I digressed for a little second, but just to come back, before we get into the science and everything that you do and your work in Cape Town, it's always quite interesting when I ask people this question in terms of when I say, what do you do away from the sciences? And, we had a conversation off air in preparing this conversation that sometimes it gets really hard to be like, okay, who am I away from the sciences? So for you, who are you away from the sciences? Are you able to identify yourself, or is it also very tricky for you to be like, okay, apart from a scientist, I am also XYZ?
Yeah, I mean, I think this question sort of like gives me a panic attack sometimes when I think about it, like, oh my goodness, who am I? And I think it's a similar question as they ask in interviews. So tell us about yourself. You're just like, what do you want to know about me? I'm just like applying for this job. I need the job. So it's always difficult for me to identify who I am away from the sciences. And it's like sometimes I can't even get out of that whole zone of, oh, I'm a researcher, I'm a scientist, I'm doing this and that. Sometimes it's really difficult for me to get out of that zone. And I'll just like, who am I? I keep asking myself the question. So sometimes I just have to have a little debrief session with myself, just sit down, meditate, and just like come back to my senses and say, but who am I? And in most cases, who am I does go into the sciences, but also just beyond the science. That's what I try to figure out in most cases. So beyond the science, who am I? And yeah, so like outside of the sciences, I'm just a girl who loves playing chess. I've enjoyed playing chess since I was in high school, and I was the only girl in high school playing chess at that time. And I've played it for so long that I believe that I'm the king. If someone is like, oh no, you're such a queen, I'll usually say, no, darling, my mother raised the king. So outside of that, I love playing chess. And when I came to Cape Town, I found out that there was just so many people playing chess that I didn't even have to be playing it to love it. And I started watching people playing chess, and I enjoyed that as well. And outside of that, also, I'm really quite involved in a lot of social development programs like that involve a lot of young women and outreach programs, both in Cape Town and in Joburg. My mom is heavily involved in social development programs, and I usually take part in those. That I just feel like some part of my life is like some form of ministry, like where I am constantly willing to learn and do more for other people. And not because I necessarily feel good about it, but I think it's important for me to make an impact in spaces that I find myself. And I'm just going to add this, and I'm a great driver. Away from the sciences, I trust myself with my driving, and people can trust me with my driving. So yeah.
I love that. That's a lot. And I mean, look at that. I think, like you said, that once you really debrief and you really self-evaluate that, hey, okay, apart from sciences, I am a chess player, a great chess player, like you said. So there's so much, but I think we're just so used to seeing ourselves in this tunnel vision thing. And it's so great that you are all of these people and more. I think even if we could probably sit for an hour and talk about all of these other things if we critically assess one by one. And I love the whole thing about what you said about the chess, because I was actually going to ask you and be like, like, oh my word, have you seen the Queen's Gambit? So it's interesting that you're like, no, I'm not a queen, I'm a king. So you're like, just disclaimer alert. No, I'm a king. I'm a king. I'm a king. And I love that. And also, about your ministry, that is such a, I think the word is, what a wonderful way to live. I think there's so many people who don't even know, their purpose, sort of. And I think you've sort of found it. And that's a gift on its own that you're able to do this. Even like you said, that sometimes you don't feel like you chose it. It just kind of happened. But it's really amazing that you are all of those people. And in our conversations, you speak a lot about your mom. And I'm wondering now, did your mom have influence in terms of you getting into STEM? So how did that journey kind of happen growing up in Soweto? How do we go from Soweto to being in Capetown and a PhD student? So what's the story? Like, fill in the blank there for us.
I call my mom my tag team partner, like tag you're it type of thing. So from an early age, like I was interested in science. I didn't have the word for it. Can I just say I didn't have the word that this is science? And I mean, just like around 5 years old, I was already very inquisitive and I was asking a lot of questions. I was already that child and I didn't know what science was. And so many things that I wanted to become, I would just have my own name for them. I remember one of the times I wanted to be a pharmacist, but I didn't know what a pharmacist, it was called a pharmacist. So I said to my mom, and because I had moments when I was a sick child. So I remember saying to my mom that, I want to be a pill producer, like a person who produces the pills. But I had a name for it, I'll be a pill creator, and I'll be to my mom, no, it's going to be called pill creator, and then they would call me by that name for some time, and I wanted, for the time when I wanted to be a doctor, I was like, okay, I want to be a doctor that focuses on arms, on broken bones and stuff. And I'd call myself the bone connector. So I will be connecting bones of people, And that's how Doctor of Moon also came up, actually. I was so, honestly, I think the moon was just one of the best things I've ever seen at that age. So my mom and I would go out every night to look at how big it is, how small it is, which star is closer today, and all of these things. So I was really an amateur astronomer before I was 10 years old. And my mom was already helping me out with all these things. And I said to my mom, I want to be the Doctor of the Moon, and Doctor of Moon kind of sticked with me. It's something that I loved even more than all the other things. I think my mom and I, my mom really helped me with exploring this. And I think it was when I was in grade 3 in room 11. I don't know why I remember the room number, but I was in room 11 at primary school.
That's so vivid.
I was in grade 3 in room 11 in primary school in Soweto. It's Inclusive primary school. And I remember we were doing some history, something in history, and then they were covering the Apollo 11, which was one of the space missions that was done then in 1969, I think. Mm. And I read about this Apollo 11, and I'm reading about Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and Neil Collins. I'm like, well, these people went to the moon. For sure, there are people that work in the moon. So I was right. Doctors of Moon really exist. And then I just asked my teacher if I could take the textbook home. I mean, back in the day, the textbook stayed in school. You can't go with the textbook home because it's not yours, really. So then she said no. The teacher said no. You're not taking this book home. So I took the book home.
Did you steal it?
I didn't steal it. I returned the book.
Okay. You took it without the knowledge of the teacher.
But I asked.
But she said no.
Yeah, so I took the
Technicalities here. No, but anyway, do carry on.
So then I went home with this book and I showed my mom. And then my mom was like, "Hey, Nana, it says these people are called astronauts, like people who go to space and go to the moon, they're called astronauts." And I was like, okay, so I want to be an astronaut. So, and that's how it all changed for me. I started going to the library and finding out about astronomy and astronaut. I learned about the planets. Before the teacher would teach me about planets, I had so many, like a lot of information about it. And things changed for me when Mark Shuttleworth went to space. And I was just like, this is real, It's not just something I'm reading about in books about people that I've never seen, people I'll never see, people I don't know. This man is South African and he went to space. So this thing must be really a thing that's happening. And I remember as a child also writing a letter to Zola 7. I don't know if you remember Zola 7.
Yes, I do. The
show, and I wrote a letter to Zola 7 saying, "Dear Zola 7, I want to meet Mark Shuttleworth, make my dream come true. I just want to see this man. That's it." And we posted that letter. Well, we don't know if he got it or not, but we did post that letter with my mom. And then since then, I started collecting pictures of the SALT telescope when it was being, the first time when they had like an image about it in the newspapers. I started collecting every information. My mother's neighbor used to buy newspaper every single day. And then she also started looking out for like astronomy information for me. And she would write in front of the page, "For Tshiamiso, page 27, for Tshiamiso, page what, right?" And I'd cut out. And that's how I just got into it. I got into it. By the time I was in high school, I was just like, I'm going to do astronomy. That's it. It exists. It's there. There is a telescope in South Africa that's being built. I want to go there. I want to see it. That's it. And that was just me. And I never changed.
Wow. What a story. I love your mom. Your mom is the MVP, the GOAT, the one. I love the support because thoroughly, and she deserves that title of being your tag team partner. And I'm sure along the journey when you had all of your wins and at different stages, it was something beautiful to share together because she's really supported you. And it's so great to have that support, going through. And it's also quite cute that you had this idea at like 3 years old and like so many years later, here you are, living your dream. And it goes back to show that, seeing these role models of people where, like you said, that when you saw a South African going to space, it just reinforced that idea that, hey, this is actually possible. And I think therefore it obviously catapults you into believing in your dream some more, because I think sometimes as a kid you think, oh well, this is only in TV, and then you sometimes push it away. But I think you had like equal amounts of support from your mom, and seeing these role models or seeing these things that affirmed that this is actually possible. So then, okay, let's fast forward, grade 3, you are definite. So how then does it happen that you, in terms of like let's say when you're at university, how do you get into this field? Because I don't think until recently a lot of people knew that this is something that you can get into. And how did you actually get into it properly? Because is there a direct route into it, or did you have to take other subjects and then divert later? So talk us through that journey.
Okay, so there is a direct route. So by the time I was in high school and I was applying for university, but like physics and astronomy, space science, and the route to take was either to do that straight BSc, to do that, And then Wits University didn't have that, but you could do a BSc degree. So you could do a BSc degree in physics, BSc degree in maths, and then later on do an honors in physics or maths, and then do astronomy later on. So for me, it was also like that. I started with an undergraduate that had nothing to do with astronomy. And then I did a physics honors. And then I did my master's then in astronomy education. And the reason when I went into my master's, there was just so many things that happened in my honors year that led me into doing some education work. And one of these things, interestingly, is science journalism. I was criticizing a lot of newspaper articles that were written about science, and I was, critiquing a lot of that work, saying that, if things were written by scientists, and if things are written by like a normal journalist about science, what information is getting lost in that? And so going into my master's, I knew I wanted to do astronomy, but I also had this urge of doing something in education. So I asked my supervisor, who, I chose a project because I knew which supervisor I wanted to work with. I was really not like playing fair at that point. And I asked my supervisor, I just chose a supervisor for a project. And when the supervisor, gave me the project, I went to talk to him and I said, well, I'm interested in astronomy, but I'm also interested in education. So what can I do with that? And he said, okay, let's try doing something in astronomy education. You're going to do some astronomy and you're going to do some education work related to astronomy. And that's how I got into the field. And for me, it was the best of both worlds. I get to do astronomy and I got to do a little bit of education work and just relating what I was doing at that point to what could be done education-wise. Funny thing is, in most cases, they will say that, research doesn't really translate the way it should in education. And I agree to an extent. And so I was also trying to close that gap and say, maybe if they could try this, this could work. So I did my research. My research was on stars. Very nice research. I loved my stars. Everywhere I went, my friends would say in my bag, is your bag so heavy because you're carrying stars in there? And like, that's how I identified so much with my research at that point. And I developed really like nice teaching materials for teachers to use in their classrooms when teaching about stars. So that's how I sort of like started getting into this whole astronomy education thing, So I developed some nice activities, and then I was just like, okay, I'm going to teach a lesson on stars to a group of teachers and see how they take that, and also criticize myself because, at that point I cannot say I'm a teacher because I know about stars. So I was just like, okay, let's try this out. And we did. We tried it out with my supervisor and it worked. It was really nice. And I was just like, I knew from that, this is what I wanted to pursue. And I was at Wits University at that time. But because I've always wanted to do astronomy at UCT, for my PhD, I applied to UCT and I wrote an email and I said, this is what I'm interested in and this is what I want to do. I shot my shot. Like, I didn't know anyone at UCT. I just sent an email and I got a reply with so many options of what would you like to work on? This is the option we have. We have that. We have that person. We have that person. Would you like to set up a meeting? I got a positive response from UCT, and that's how I ended up in UCT. And it was really nice. When I came here, I was just like, okay, this is what I want to work on. And then UCT said, oh, but this is what we have. What would you like to explore? And I'm finding myself exploring so much beyond astronomy. Like, I've just like tapped into a bit of cognitive science, just like understanding how we think and reason and how we can use that in astronomy. So I've tapped onto that and it's exciting. I mean, I've Yeah, I'm getting so excited when I speak about my research and DCT in that sense. But yeah, that part is just really exciting, and that's what I'm currently doing.
Again, we can tell that you're really excited about your PhD, and you can just hear the enthusiasm in your voice. So now I just want to give you the opportunity. Well, first, let me just tell everybody what you're doing. Your PhD, and like you mentioned, your focus is on astronomy education research, otherwise known as AER, where you're looking at ways of making astronomy content knowledge accessible to students, teachers, and practitioners. This is so interesting. And please just let us know what do you do, and why is it so important that you are doing this research?
Just like anyone else, sometimes I just feel like an imposter if I should be doing this really, but education, I think, is one of the fields that I feel like it called me. Like I feel like it chose me, I wasn't always intentional about doing things in education, but I find myself in spaces where education is important to speak about and to do, both informal and formal education, So mostly because education allows us to have access, just in general, like in both informal and formal. And if you think about it, if you visit a village and you want to speak to the chief of the village, normally you would find out from the villagers on how you approach the chief, what you need to do, and everything else, And when you do all of those things, then you have access to the chief. And I think it's just like that, like each and everything that we approach is some form of education, which is why I say both formally and informally. And I think even in astronomy, we need something like that. We need something that will allow us to have access into this knowledge, because the truth is, yes, we are met with difficult physics and difficult mathematics that we have no idea sometimes how to navigate in our own heads, and I like saying this so much that astronomy is one of the most inclusive fields that we can ever have, because we all have the night sky. The night sky is always available to everyone. But most of the time, people are met with this whole difficult concept and difficult maths and difficult science that they need to do that, they just stop doing it. So in my research, I research things like that. I find out what the problem is at first, because I cannot just say, okay, this is a problem and I just continue with it. I find out if this is a problem and I work at how can we make sure that this doesn't become a problem for students anymore. Because we will have like a big class of first years in astronomy, but in second year, we probably have like 20 students, So what happens to the other ones type of thing? So access to astronomy knowledge and to astronomy content is very important. And not just for students coming in, I say for teachers as well. And I've just mentioned that in my previous research study, I did this whole thing where I was suggesting how teachers could teach about stars. And here's the thing is that most of our teachers don't actually know how to teach that difficult math and difficult science that we are met with in astronomy, except just pointing out, oh, these are the stars that we have. Oh, this is the moon. But the science behind why is it that the moon is like this? Why is it that we have a lunar eclipse? Why is it that we have a solar eclipse? So my work looks at trying to make sure that all these things are, so my work is coming up some kind of mitigation between the astronomers, the actual astronomers, and the teachers who are teaching this astronomy, the practitioners who are people that would like to be working with astronomy, but not necessarily as astronomers, and to students. So my work focuses on just being that plan, like just that whole thing saying, okay, you can try this out. If it doesn't work, you come back to us. But we also do work in terms of the planetarium work. We have the planetarium, and I know as a child, I went to the planetarium as well. And we've seen how planetariums can both be like just a fun excursion, but it can also be a learning environment. So sometimes we look at to what extent is this a learning environment? Are kids just excited not to be in the classroom and they're in the planetarium, but they get there and learn nothing? Or can this be some kind of a useful learning space if used correctly? So that's mostly my work. And I mentioned earlier that I tap in a bit into cognitive science. At the moment, I am working on how is it that we can use our own our thinking. So so cognitive science has so many rules and so many other avenues. But one avenue that I liked was about that I personally like and personally use is how they relate thinking and reasoning and our thought process to our own experiences. So astronomy on its own is an abstract concept. Astronomy is abstract because of how big these distances are that we can't even comprehend. And in most cases, for all these abstract things, we use and we base them on some of these experiences that we have, So for sometimes, for example, you'll say that, and we always say this, that, oh, I feel so close to this person, we are good friends. But that's necessarily based on our own primary experiences with, being close to our caregivers, getting a hug and getting some warmth and love with our caregivers. And we use that to express ourselves. So that's some way of thinking. And so I'm trying to draw on those primary experiences and trying to understand how we can think about astronomy in a way that it doesn't divert us from that, and we can use that, we can draw from that experiences to understand all the other complex things, because our abstract thinking or abstract concepts are mostly based on some of our own primary experiences. So that's what I'm using. So I'm just okay, so maybe if we can look at what are the non-metaphorical concepts that we have that are really primary to us, and how can we use those in astronomy, and how can we use those to create access then later on.
Wow, this is so interesting. I can tell why you love what you do so much, especially because your research transcends more than just the science. It's got that aspect where you can see the practicality, the real life implementation. And I think the best part is that you can see it and you can see the results after, let's say, for example, you suggest an idea and it works, and you have those immediate results. And I think in terms of how science is moving in this transdisciplinary nature, in the sense of that we're not just talking about ideas, but we're talking about how can we implement them into real life, your research fits like snap bang in the middle to that. And that is absolutely fantastic. And I think more work, not only in astronomy, but I think in a lot of other things, needs to be done in terms of the education aspect of it. And it's quite wild, hey, that here you are in undergrad, you did these concepts of like physics and whatnot, but now at PhD, you're doing something completely different. And I think that just goes to show that like some of the stuff that we do at undergrad, not saying that they're not important, but then does not define who you are, and you can build your own sort of research. And that's the beauty about a PhD. You come in with your own ideas and you get to create this, I don't want to say new space, but just something so different, and you can fall in love with it like how you have. It's wonderful.
And also one of the motivations for me to be in this field was the fact that when I meet a lot of Black people, and they ask me, what am I doing? And I tell them that, I'm doing astronomy, or I want to do astronomy. They would normally say to me, but how will that help people? How will that help Black people? Like, how does that contribute to society? So I think that's also one of the things that really motivated me to do this as well, to say, I also need something that will have outputs for me in the community, And one thing about research that actually really makes me love research is if something works, it's great. You look at why does it work? It doesn't end there. So if this works, okay, great. But why does it work? We look at that. If it doesn't work, that's still great. We're going to look at that, So I think that's That's the joy of it for me. That's the joy for it. It's that something will always come out of it, and you'll always have something to look at.
No, as we wrap up slowly, just quickly, you touched on it about how when you speak to other Black people and they hear you as an astronomer, I think to a lot of, in the past, to a lot of Black people, even Africans as a whole, being an astronomer was not like an option that seemed, viable, right? So you, in fact, are actually a co-chair of the transformation and inclusivity at the University of Cape Town Astronomy Department. So tell me more, just like in brief, in your role, what do you do with that, where you have these, stereotypes or that misinformation? Like, what does your role involve specifically in that part? Because I think that's very important.
Yeah, I think. Okay, so it also has like some background and motivation. So I'm just going to try and be brief on that. So thing is, South Africa is becoming one of the homes for astronomy in the world, not just in our country, but in the world. We have the Square Kilometer Array, the Meerkat, the SALT. We have all these telescopes and technologies in our country. And I think I attended a talk. There was a Trailblazer series happening by Astronomy in Color. And one of the speakers was Professor Jocelyn Bell. And she said that the next Einstein is in Africa. The next Einstein is in South Africa. How exciting will that be if our own are part of this amazing discoveries? And so that's it for me. When I'm part of this, I'm more of saying, how can we, like as a department, how can we be more inclusive? How can we, integrate our students within the department and let them know that they're part of us? And one of the things is just getting students involved, getting students being involved in setting up, big departmental meetings or setting up journal clubs, getting them in because they feel like they're part of something bigger. They don't feel like they're just isolated in their office all the time. Let's have tea together, that's like one of the things we implemented. When we implemented this, we thought, it's just tea. But having tea together and being in a group where you're having conversations with everyone about everything makes you see that you're not just a student and you just have to submit something and go, but your contributions in these conversations is important. We like to hear about you as well. So I think that was our starting point to say, hey, I was just like, okay, I'm coming from Joburg. I don't know anyone here, but I want to get involved. Where do I start? And I didn't know where to start, and the committee was just coming up. And, when they said, who wants to come in? I said, yes, I'll come in. I was excited to be part of that. But, it is very, it's getting to PhD, is very difficult for a lot of Black students because of also financial constraints and having responsibilities at home. So in most cases, Black students will start, but they will not necessarily go all the way to PhD. But the nicest and the greatest thing, and I always say this about in astronomy, is that you don't just learn astronomy. There are other skills that you will learn, and those other skills you can use later on. So I also use this as part of encouragement that, okay, yes, you can do astronomy. Know that in itself, astronomy offers you diverse career plans, career streams that you can do. So come into astronomy. It's not just about stars. We are more than stars. And you can do something else. I think what's more important is, we need to start seeing ourselves into these spaces. And slowly but surely, we are moving there. I think it's just one of those things that we never saw people in these spaces, people that look like us in these spaces. And the more we see each other, the more we offer support for each other, and the more we have a voice. We can move more towards being more inclusive and then transformed. We need to be included first, and then we can transform. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, spot on. I 1,000% agree that that is the thing. The quote that never gets old is that it's impossible to aspire to be something that you never see. And the fact that you're able to see people that, you're able to dream, and it's absolutely great. And I think it's a perfect way for us to just end this wonderful conversation. And I just admire the work that you do. And I think, this is only the beginning, and you're going to do so much more. And I just love how passionate you are about your research. And I wish you all of the best. It was so, so lovely having you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Finally, having the time to do this. Thank you so much. I appreciate having this conversation with you.
I enjoyed it too, and it's an absolute pleasure. And to everybody else who tuned in, as usual, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Root of the Science podcast with your girl and with an E. Until next time, goodbye.